Hi, today is the 18th of May, 2022. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, like my official YouTube video link, and go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is also ladydorybell.com. So, I'm going to acknowledge this particular outfit as kind of a this particular topic that I'm going to go over is just so, however, it seems befitting for this particular outfit regarding the pinstripes. So, there is the situation I have told people about regarding my dead ex-husband. We were separated for the second time when I was informed that he claimed that he had been called at the UTHSCSA or whatever it's called, the lab, regarding supposedly how he was going to also be capable to choose, in reference to being called on IRR. For those who don't know what IRR is, Individual Ready Reserve. This translates to if you have a certain background, if you have a certain specific type of MOS specialty, if you get called, you are not going to choose a different rank. So he had said he was an E5, and he tried to tell me after he supposedly got a phone call telling him he was called on IRR and could change his rank to an officer. Anybody who has ever been involved with the armed forces, it doesn't matter what branch or division, so you could be in the Army or the Air Force or the Coast Guard or the Marine Corps or the Navy. There is a version of IRR, only for certain individuals especially. Now, while yes, there is the aspect of the time frame in 2006, however, an infantry airborne ranger is not going to be put through officer training school when that's going on at that level. That's just not a situation that would ever be. So I called him out on the lie. Now this is important, okay? So remember, I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I was in a coma. I was medevaced from Fort Sill, Oklahoma to Brooke Army Medical Center at Fort Sam Houston in Joint Base San Antonio, as known now, Military City, USA, in San Antonio, Texas. I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain that took 8.5 years to dissipate. Here's a physical representation, I suppose, for you to remember. I could make the joke. So, if it's funny or not, I suppose it depends regarding this lecture. So I gave birth to my son less than a full 1.5 years from the time frame of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And I gave birth to my daughter less than 2.5 years from the time frame of waking up from my coma. Because remember, or my head injury, or coma, either way. Because my head injury happened on the 16th of April in 2000. I gave birth to my son on the 2nd of September in 2001. I gave birth to my daughter the 24th of September 2002. I was on US soil in the United States of America, in the state of Texas, in the city of San Antonio, as a 17-year-old after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, when I woke up from my coma at some point in time during the summer months, because that's however long I had been in a coma from the 16th of April. in the year of 2000. I left for basic training on the 1st of March in the year of 2000. That's when I entered basic training, for those who understand that time frame. Now, this male named Sergeant Robert Walker Nichols, E5, who is my dead ex-husband, I did not get the chance to legally divorce. Does not change the fact that it was during the second and final separation when that occurred, which was after the city of San Antonio in various areas had met me. So in whichever area of the city of San Antonio, as well as Dallas-Fort Worth area in the state of Texas, I spoke with I don't know who over the years regarding my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, my coma, subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain, the headaches, migraines, cognitive disorders, memory deficits, having gone to second grade math from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math because of the levels of damage with a subarachnoid hemorrhage. I actually have a physical indentation in the top of my skull from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. So I was 17 years old when I woke up, and in comparison to anybody really paying attention to that point, my now ex-in-laws and my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, along with whomever else that I had known at the time, paid attention to whatever details they paid attention to. So the first separation occurred in the year of 2004, and multiple times he tried to get my sympathy for stuff that wasn't going to work because he wanted me to have sympathy for, the fact that I was pregnant less than a year and a half from my head injury and 2.5 years from my head injury. Delivering 2 children, one each year, and the amount of labor time to deliver each one. Dealt with him being upset that I cared more about my son and my daughter, their lives and their safety, as well as my own, in comparison. And so while people heard these arguments that occurred over the years between 2001 into 2004, as well as 2005, randomly, throughout the city of San Antonio, my ex-in-laws really need to think about the honesty regarding a few things. They really need to accept some of the acknowledgement in this particular reference as to how they know how people are in San Antonio, Texas. So we weren't just on the military base. There's San Antonio near Military Highway. There's the Medical Center of San Antonio. There's South Side San Antonio. There's Southwest Side San Antonio. There's Southeast Side San Antonio. That was the majority of areas that either one of us would go around. Maybe that might make some sense to a few people regarding a few things. And so then there's the garage situation and reference to 151 Road Warrior Cactus Jack, also known as Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr. situation. Hypothetically, some people could find an issue with the garage situation. My house in San Antonio. Maybe someone has some common sense as I made attempts repeatedly to get assistance in the correct ways. And so while my ex-in-laws might wish to whatever, because I'll get to that, there are those facts that those people need to accept. So in 2004, he tried wearing those dress blues. This is before, by 2 years, the time frame of the IRR claim from that situation where he thought he could go to OCS or OTS, depending on, to go from an airborne ranger E5, for those who understand this, to an O tree. That's what the claim was in the year of 2006. I made attempts to explain to people, and they brought up to me what I knew. I didn't graduate basic training. I'm fairly certain that's something you wouldn't learn in basic training. Doesn't matter whether you're going to be an automated logistical specialist or some other MOS. You probably, I don't know, maybe I knew a few things really well, such as the UCMJ, for example, regarding hair. Had a few, Anyway, so then there's Fort Worth. Around Fort Worth, by the way, from 2000 to 2008. Before in 2006, that situation, in addition with the garage sale, that's San Antonio and DFW, informed of that. Not just some places like Nine Lives Books or the San Antonio pagan community. No, Fort Worth. In different areas of Fort Worth and the surrounding areas that were informed of the garage situation in reference to that. Yeah, a few people here and there. Yeah, I mean, it's just San Antonio to Fort Worth and whatever gas stations in between. That's all, just different stores and neighborhood locations to keep in mind. Before 2007, when that dress blue whatever was worn around San Antonio on Fort Sam Houston, because Warrior Transition Unit is right there. Remember, his uniform was shipped from San Antonio to Tallil Air Force Base, and then when he went from Tallil Air Force Base to Germany, his stuff was shipped there. For those who know logistics, you might be capable to understand how many people may have seen those dress blues. And then from Germany back to San Antonio. So that's all, so there was, and you gotta remember, he went to retraining of National Guard, whatever, at Camp Mabry, through Camp Bullis. So, whatever in those regards of dress blues. That's all. It's just Camp Bullis to Camp Mabry after San Antonio to Fort Worth and Dallas areas and stuff like that. Then this is what my ex-in-laws have needed to accept before I even get to certain things. So then, wherever, how many people could ever hear something like that? So here's an irony. In the year of 2004, before my now dead ex-husband shot himself and had to be taken to BAMC, through my biological father driving him, as I was informed, when I was in Seguin, Texas. So that's something my ex-in-laws have needed to accept as well. So then there's these factors, as well as them having to remember that. So not only is there the dress blues situation, there's that, and there are people on college campuses. He was in college. He was going to UTSA from 2000 to 2004. So anybody who could think as far as how he was sexist towards female professors and that particular aspect, what people could research something on the news. And so then there's the fact that certain people knew that I had been awake from a coma for less than a year and a half before delivering my son, and that I had been in a coma for less than 2.5 years before delivering my daughter. So there's college campuses to take in consideration. And he was going in the science area, so then, you know, what females in the science area have been annoyed by certain things for a while. And, you know, I mean, you know, just something for my ex-in-laws to take in consideration as to a few people who might be upset. And then, at this point, if there's any needless problems, you know. So, in this hypothetical, including my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister. So remember, with my ex-in-laws, you got Lackland Air Force Base and that graduation in 2001 as well, regarding my blue ID card, just a couple of months before the 11th of September 2001, just, you know, in case there's any scanning. And so in that particular reference, then you have that sort of, you know, situation, which is important to remember. So in this reference, in 2007, back in San Antonio, however many areas the traveling Stolen Valor dress blue uniform went all over the world to however many military bases, as far as the logistical standards, and reference to however, you know, non-essential items are put in the order of shipment in comparison to a rucksack or a duffel bag, for those understanding aspects. So, so then in 2007, then there's September and the JCPenney pictures. After however many, whatever, of walking around on a military installation in Military City, USA, in those dress blue Stolen Valor uniform. Now, Grandpa Nichols, when he saw the pictures, he recognized his rack. And so all of these ex-in-laws of mine told Grandpa Nichols that they thought he didn't know what he was talking about. They called him crazy, and I defended Grandpa Nichols. And Grandpa Nichols dealt with this the whole time, essentially, from getting the pictures all the way till after Laurel Land Funeral Home. Where Laurel Land Funeral Home, I'll get to that in a minute, because there's just so much. So there's all these people, and then who could have seen the digital version through JCPenney's, that my ex-in-laws would need to think about as well as anybody who he took pictures with, and their social media accounts, and so on and so forth. So Grandpa Nichols had pointed out like several ribbons and all that sort of stuff, and my ex-in-laws didn't want to listen to Grandpa Nichols. He told them repeatedly that it was his rack in regards of, well, he didn't say rack, it was his awards and medals that were on those dress blues. So there's Halloween in 2007, where the already little Bo Peep with the, you know, my maiden last name, thought I'd make fun of that. And so, you know, little Bo Peep lost her sheep and another one ran away. Then something another. I don't know what the rest of it, I'm gonna have to look that up now that I think about it. Nonetheless, you know, so this is what happened. And so now there's Military City, USA, because it's not the first time that I personally had this experience, not just in regards of learning about other people who had stolen valor wrongly. You don't steal valor, especially in San Antonio, Texas, or anywhere really, but, you know, Military City, USA now. And so, in my opinion, if you're gonna wear something like reenacting stuff, you should probably inform people, at the very minimum, or give them some sort of a backdrop so they understand in comparison to assuming. So, in those, I've made attempts to do so. So, in regards of my ex-in-laws needing to accept that stuff, as far as all those details, you know, I know Father's Day is coming up, And so, here's something that they can think about. In those references of my son, his dead father, in regards of how, because of certain situations, hypothetically, that had to be brought forward. Same thing with my daughter and her dead father in that situation. So, while my ex-in-laws cared more about death in comparison to life regarding my son and my daughter, which, yes, they're dead relatives, son and daughter, but my son and my daughter, I am the one who grew them in my uterus. I am the one who was in labor. I was the one who delivered them after carrying them full term. So, I kind of am a smidgen bit about life and living. Surprise. So anyway, my ex-in-laws, can think about that as far as that's concerned. And so, all those stolen valor issues regarding the dress blues. In the city of San Antonio, 5 military bases as far as that's concerned. Joint Base San Antonio, whole city. Anybody who's been around an area that has a joint base, see whether or not how many cities are involved, or if it's just the names of bases. And think about how many situations in regards of. So that's how many, because you've got the veteran community as well in the state of Texas. A large number. So then you have that. And so there's the Vietnam War ribbon that was on those dress blues. For those who don't know, I learned that in the year of 2020, that the Vietnam War ribbon was on the dress blues in the year of 2007 for a male who was born in 1976. Just for those who need to remember that. And so, then there's that. And then, that's a very different version of a participation trophy. I know that there's some special snowflakes out there, but that's kind of a little overboard in my opinion. Yeah, whatever as far as that's concerned. Nonetheless, just saying. So, just 1970, but So, my ex-in-laws have needed to accept that as well as remember that. And then, then there's the amount of females that were in it. So, like, the irony, he had a neighbor that he was involved with. You remember Emily, how she lived in the cul-de-sac with Arnold and Josa, in regards to my house in San Antonio? And those individuals, first and foremost knew that when I purchased my house on the corner in the cul-de-sac, reference to my age, the after effects of my head injury, all this other stuff. But they thought what they thought of him. And those situations, it was just, I had been in labor in the hospital for over 7 days to deliver my daughter, and a couple of weeks later, I had to mow the lawn because, it was a push mower as well. And I don't translate that to just pushing after you turn on the engine. No, I actually used a push mower. It wasn't a self-propelled, unless you consider it that I had self-propelled that lawnmower. And it did have an engine, so those who know the weight difference. And so, that's just a third of an acre. So, the cul-de-sac and the subdivision of Pheasant Creek subdivision near Apple Creek subdivision knew this. Yes, they knew those numbers as far as 2000 and 2001 and 2002. It was known. So, and I still had the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain at that time in 2002. When I purchased my house, moved in, all that stuff. Yeah, so there's that. And, Emily Hinojosa had driven all the way from San Antonio, Texas to Fort Worth, Texas to attend the funeral so that way she could have a final goodbye to my dead ex-husband before, the burial, So there's that, and when I had looked at certain things, I noticed there was a light pink, kind of pastel pink lipstick. It's kind of weird seeing that on my dead ex-husband's lips, but that is what it is. So in regards of my ex-in-laws, aside from the fact, yes, I know, David Osteen would ever rank in the Air Force at the time of 2008. His wife, my ex-sister-in-law, Mary Evangelina Osteen, maiden name Nichols, along with 2 dependents additionally to that regarding Sandra Marie Osteen and Ariel Nicole Osteen. Whatever rank David Osteen had been in the year of 2008, yes, the Chief Warrant Officer Tree from the Army had told that male, whatever rank in the year of 2008, David Osteen, told his dependent wife, that Chief Warrant Officer Tree, again, remember rank is very important in the military. So that dependent and the other 2 dependents of David Osteen, whatever enlisted rank in the Air Force from the entrance date in the year of 2001, in the year of 2008, that dependent group of David Osteen from the Air Force had attitude with the Chief Warrant Officer Tree. Because the Chief Warrant Officer Tree at an E5 infantry in regards to the J.C. Penney picture. And he couldn't talk with her legally, but anybody who's met my ex-sister-in-law, Mary Evangelina Osteen, and or her 2 daughters, Sandra Marie Osteen and Ariel Marie Osteen, as well as those who have known my ex-mother-in-law, Lydia Evangelina Nichols, and then my other ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, and her daughter, Brianna Marie Nichols, may have the dash of Lopez or just Lopez, and then her other daughter, Marissa Marie, either Lopez or Nichols Lopez, and her son, Joseph Anthony Lopez. We're all told, as well as Tony Walker Nichols, former Army, and his second wife, Gail Nichols, for those who know. Gail's 2 daughters, Amber and Tori, for those who know. So that Chief Warrant Officer Tree was dealing with all of those people in regards of until I could arrive from San Antonio to Fort Worth. So, after being informed of the information from I think it was a major and a chaplain, or maybe the chaplain was a major and the other one was a sergeant or whatever, and no, I was not surprised, because in Halloween in 2007, I dealt with an argument conversation because I wouldn't defend my now dead ex-husband in the neighborhood my house was in because he wore his dress blues on Halloween, those stolen valor dress blues. He wore that around for Halloween in the city of San Antonio. You know, there's this VA hospital right down the street on Eckert, And then there's another VA hospital that's a little bit down the street near medical. And so my ex-in-laws have needed to think about this a lot more. So, that Chief Warrant Officer tree, as well as the Army, because the Army really needed to think it's CID. And as far as that's concerned, I mean, seriously now, do you have MapQuest? Nonetheless, Google Maps? Waze? Is there something? Is there some sort of traveling map thing that could be looked at? CID, just pointing this out there. And so there's that. So my ex-in-laws, all of those that I literally described, anybody who's known any combination of, this is what that one Chief Warrant Officer tree. You feel sympathy for that Chief Warrant Officer tree, now don't you, in this lecture? You must. I felt sympathy that day because I knew exactly what was going on as because so I pulled my van up to park after driving from San Antonio, Texas through Austin to DFW area, Laurelland Funeral Home with my son and my daughter, and then, Cactus Jack on Sunday, so like that whole way, and then the phone call from the gift chapel because they decided to change the date in comparison to my son and my daughter being there last minute because, the chaplain was about to go on vacation, and so, sure. Anyway, so I pull up, and before I can put the car in park and turn it off, my ex-in-laws are surrounding my vehicle. They need to think about that. Look at the travel time. And I'm just saying. So then, I get out, and so those who know these people, before I could get my son or my daughter out of the vehicle, I am only capable to step out of the vehicle and all of them do a little horseshoe around me. And the chief, the Army won't talk with us. Well, yeah, no, duh. You're not the executrix, I am. Of course they're not gonna talk with you. So, they do know about my blue ID card, by the way. They know that the legal aspects to the divorce didn't occur. So, they knew all of this, but they decided to act the way they did. And so, anybody who knows how a Chief Warrant Officer tree is, and anybody who knows those individuals, especially when they're being emotional about something with their feelings, which, yes, I understand, that by technicalities, certain whatevers. Nonetheless, it does not change the fact at all whatsoever that these situations are what they are. And so when I got my son and my daughter to the bathroom to then go meet with the Chief Warrant Officer tree, we go into a big room with a large oval table, and I had no problem with my ex-in-laws being there because then they could hear it directly from the Chief Warrant Officer tree. So then so I don't know if he spoke with them or not at all, but they couldn't get certain things from the Chief Warrant Officer tree is what it boiled down to. Anyway, Chief Warrant Officer tree asks me, after putting the JCPenney picture, blow-up picture, so it was like 24 by 36, for those who need a reference, and of In the Dress Blues, by the way, with the rack. And so Grandpa Nichols, from the time frame of end of September, beginning of October through January, Grandpa Nichols was telling his family that his youngest child was wearing his medals and ribbons mixed with other ones. My ex-in-laws didn't want to listen, but needed to listen to Grandpa Nichols, because Grandpa Nichols had informed Because anybody who knows anybody from the Vietnam War and live with someone from the Vietnam War, maybe you have an understanding as to if there was an issue with some medals and ribbons, how that would be. He did 4 volunteer tours, by the way. So, go out to, or I go to look at the picture, and before I can, my ex-in-laws lunge on the table to start yelling at the Chief Warrant Officer Tree, and I, halt, no, no, so I tell my ex-in-laws, back up off on that, no. So whether it was a good choice or not, it is what it is when it comes to saving the Chief Warrant Officer Tree from my ex-in-laws, depending on. So I get outside with the Chief Warrant Officer Tree. I tell him, just wait, we're gonna have to walk around and talk about anything but, whatever he needs to speak with me until my ex-in-laws are out of the way. So we walked and they ran around and we walked, the Chief Warrant Officer Tree walked with me probably for about half an hour or so before finally my ex-in-laws got the memo and went inside and left us alone, from as best as I could tell. So yeah, I can make a joke at this point. And he walks with me and he talks with me. And he tells me that I'm So, when they finally went in, and as he was smoking his cigar while I was going through however many cigarettes at the time, for that amount of time, getting to what, I could make the joke. I was born in the year of the dog. I needed to stretch my legs after all that drive, we're just walking around. And, like certain whatevers, how sometimes, and stuff like that. So, it is. Yes. Sure, my first dog was a half collie, half husky, while also having a Weimaraner, sorta-ish, and a husky, and a German Shepherd. Ish, as far as locations I go with dogs that I, hang out with. And then, after waking up from my coma, my choice of an Akita Black Lab Chow Chow mix, named Dionysus. Yeah, that was my boy. And then situations occurred because of a few whatevers as far as that's concerned, between my biological mother and my biological father and my biological sister, as well as my now dead ex-husband, and anything in regards to any medical situations. So I've done what I could to explain stuff, and I have done what I could to explain stuff regarding what I was dealing with, and any medical aspects, because remember, I did not consent to, and so, dog was protective of me and all that, so there's that to keep in mind regarding my dog Dionysus. I did the best I could, and all this stuff I dealt with, and, then, think about how I had to protect my son and my daughter and myself in regards of, then, I could only do so much. I went somewhere. There was always an issue regarding my dog sort of situation. And so that was as it was until it wasn't, because of, the end portion was the way that went, which my now dead ex-husband partially acknowledged years later, how he had brought up the .22, which was the same firearm that he had used on my dog Dionysus, and he confessed to a few things. I can't remember what I was informed of as far as specific combination of whatever, but maybe someone knows about what lab work is. And so, those situations, because why would that matter to my ex-in-laws to pay attention to, as well as my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, and those references. And so then the Chief Warrant Officer Tree in 2008 had asked me if I would be surprised as to whether or not if I would be surprised regarding if the dress blues were stolen valor. And I said, well, you must have read my record. And he said, yeah, I know-ish who you are. Oh, okay, cool. So, if my ex-sister-in-law and or one of the niece's nephews showed that Chief Warrant Officer Tree my blue ID card when I wasn't there, officially, by legal standards, you would have confessed to the situation regarding Lackland Air Force Base in regards of my blue ID card. And since I filed a San Antonio police report, albeit when I did, there's still that fact that if my ex-sister-in-law and or ex-mother-in-law showed that Chief Warrant Officer Tree my blue ID card, which obviously I would not hand over to anybody, except for to check it to a military installation or if needing for whatever specifics, but they wouldn't keep it because mine is mine. So, made the attempts to explain to people about that for years. Nonetheless, that Chief Warrant Officer Tree, if he was shown that, there's those clarifications additionally that my ex-in-laws would need to keep to remember, because obviously then they would have spoken in Georgia and Oklahoma about me to people in the South. And then any of the people in the South that they knew who had any military whatever, that maybe they showed a picture of those dress blues situation to. That have the actual knowledge in comparison to someone who was in Desert Shield or Desert Storm. Maybe they knew someone a little further back, or maybe they were at a military installation and showed whichever. They need to remember that. Because I have the one set of ex-in-laws, which the blue ID card, in Georgia. And then my ex-brother-in-law in near Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And then one ex-sister-in-law and ex-mother-in-law near Carswell Air Force Base with the Navy. So that's just for a little, reminder. And so then, in regards of those dress blues, it was asked of me if because they had done a white sort of whatever around it to block out all of the stolen valor, like so much, like you didn't even know he was wearing dress blues so much that the situation was. And so that's another thing my ex-in-laws need to remember. Then the fact that my nieces and my ex-in-laws took pictures at the funeral of the casket. Grandma Nichols has the pictures of the dress blues, and maybe there are other people who do. And they could just take a picture. Look, like I'm the one who has cognitive issues. However, I'm sure if they were to hold a picture from one of the pictures that they took during the time frame and put it up next to that dress blues picture in Grandma Nichols' house, unless they have their own version to look at, and they could see if there's any difference. And then if they could find a picture of Grandpa Nichols in his dress greens and not dress blues, because the Army has dress greens, and while yes, there are some areas that have dress blues in the Army, they're very specific in comparison to the actualities of. And so that's something my ex-in-laws would need to think about in that reference as well. before ever getting in reference to Fort Sam Houston and the 3 males, because, if he was infantry, would it be dress blues? Or would it be dress greens for infantry? I'm fairly certain it would be dress greens. I'm not, 100% certain. However, maybe somebody could figure that out. And so, my ex-in-laws would need to understand and accept that. So would my biological mother and biological father and biological sister. Because the Army wears dress greens and the Air Force wears dress blues. So, I don't know what the problem is for people to think, though there are certain MOSs, I do know, that have blue uniforms, except if not, well, that's something to take in consideration. Because at Fort Sam Houston in Medical Hold Unit, I was informed by Captain Morning that cavalry officers wear dress blues. So, because of trying to compete with the Marine Corps as far as uniforms. It's told to me in the year 2000. So, some stuff to pay attention to, which I've pointed out before, but I don't know if anybody paid attention to those details. Probably something to pay attention to, where I'd be exonerated fully. And so there's that amount of. So if my ex-in-laws, whichever one, and or my biological mother, and or biological father, and or biological sister decided to do a little ruse regarding Wilford Hall and thought that they would lie their way on to Lackland Air Force Base for my biological mother to go and not know anything at all because of her feelings in regards of I don't know what in the year 2005, though a few other situations afterwards. So, a few things to take into consideration regards of anything at all. Those dress blues. So, because the Air Force has dress blues, not the Army, except for what I was informed of regarding supposedly. So, I've made attempts to actually clarify and verify a few things. So my ex-in-laws and all those other hypothetical connected issues that those pictures would be capable to clarify and verify. Like, for example, there's no shinies on the left side. There's no ribbon around the arm the same coloration or way. And so on and so forth. So, something for people to remember to keep in mind. And then there's that CID investigation that I dealt with. Because the irony of my dress blues, as far as the situation the Chief Warrant Officer Tree said was an issue for me, because mother of 2 children. And I didn't graduate basic training, though I have a blue ID card of and for the Armed Forces of the United States of America. So I had been given a warning, and I paid attention, but other people decided to view things as they had and needed to think about that. So, then there was CID and going up the chain of command as far as that was concerned. And then making sure my son and my daughter could have a memorial service, because if in the hypothetical of the assumption, and if couldn't get into my military records at Fort Sam Houston and what they may and or may not have known, well, then there's that. And so it's stuff that the Army has needed to accept, the Air Force has needed to accept, Coast Guard has needed to accept, Marine Corps has needed to accept, and the Navy's needed to accept, as well as civilians. Because, it's the reality. So I didn't graduate basic training. I only know what the rainbow ribbon looks as and what the Medal of Honor ribbon looks as. That's it. So for those who don't know, the dress blues picture had around 4 racks or 4 lengths of lines of medals and ribbons, as well as, or ribbons on that one with some metal pieces. And then on the other side, there were different medals that were hanging, and then rope and stuff like that. So those who would know more in that capacity as to what that would be, still, my ex-in-laws and anyone else who decided to take pictures can take a look between the JCPenney pictures to what the Army fixed and repaired. So, something important to take in consideration if in the by chance I was ever wrongly and falsely accused of something I didn't do, because that would require to pay attention to all of that other arrangement of details. And remember, we were separated twice. So, the knowledge as to the whatever examples of, such as my neighbor giving a hypothetical kiss before he was buried, knowing she's married to another guy and a mother of 2 daughters and that, but we were separated for over a year and a half by that point in time. So how many males could relate to that? So there's that time. Not that it really matters, because remember, there's 2000 through 2008. However, the other separation from 2004 into 2005. So some people might need to think about that and remember that. So some people might have issues with stolen valor, obviously, for good reason. So it's important to end all types of stolen valor for many reasons. If you earn valor, that's one thing. But, that's that particular situation. And he wore those dress blues around San Antonio. Again, Military City, USA. So everybody everywhere has needed to take that in consideration, all those details, before assuming. So yes, there were the additional factors of the Bronze Star situation and that area of Fort Sam Houston regarding Major General Gilman's office after speaking with Major Rosas and Captain Smith in regards of Warrior Transition Unit, and those aspects they've needed to keep in mind. Additionally, the 3 soldiers from Iraq had explained that where the mortar round went off was either 300 or 350 yards away from where my dead ex-husband was on post, to keep in mind for all of the individuals who would understand that, to remember additionally. So there you go. I thought of MASH, and there was this one particular individual in comparison to facts. So while I deal with what I deal with, there are the facts, and so something for everybody to keep in mind, to remember in reference to my dead ex-husband, because that was not my choice. Remember how the justice of the peace occurred, and remember I was pregnant as I was, and that was on the soil of the United States of America. And I stood against it, and, still did the best I could for my son and my daughter and I. However, that's the reality to take in consideration. And remember, I was 19 when I gave birth to my son. 20 when I gave birth to my daughter. Just a year and a half and 2.5 years, but a little less per when giving birth. After waking up from my coma, after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. Remember, 2000, 2001, 2002. So, and the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain wasn't fully dissipated until the end of September-ish, fully, from every MRI, CAT scan, and EEG and EKG. In 2008, to remember, to keep in mind. And so, probably something important to think about. So, but what importance would that be? Especially when Major General Gilman, in his opinion, had told me he thought I needed to get over what occurred when it was Medical Hold Unit, because it's called Warrior Transition Unit now. In the same year, before the 3 males in that situation. So, it's probably something that should be thought about, because there's each 3, 6, or 9 months from 2000 into 2004, I went to Fort Sam Houston for the medical board review. And additionally, I had all of those doctor appointments with the neurologists and neuropsychologists and life skills and so on and so forth. So they knew, they're medical professionals. That's what I was told. And so obviously with prescriptions that I had been prescribed, shouldn't they be capable to know arithmetic? So for 4 years, that was known as often as that was. So, how important is that for individuals to think about? Probably, I'm going to guesstimate for this lecture, probably fairly important. So, you guys make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel to learn more, to be capable to get those notifications. And then also like my official YouTube videos, go and watch and listen to, I have a few. And if you're gonna leave a comment, make sure to use etiquette and respect. And if you remember also go to my website, www.susanmeling.com, also known as ladydorybell.com. So, you know, you can think about that. There's my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, some stuff I've worked on. Maybe that stuff makes a bit more sense to consider. And remember, so I think my ex-in-laws and my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister have needed to really come to terms with that and understand and accept those facts because of the reality. I learned some point in time in 2019 or 2020 in the state of Texas, you have stand your ground laws. Well, I did what I could to protect my son, my daughter, and I, as best as I possibly could. I did what I could to assist protecting who I could additionally, for whatever that's worth, however important that would be. So that just happened on the soil of the United States of America and the state of Texas, before my scuba diving and what occurred in reference to McCoy Elementary School and the Fort Worth Zoo situation and all of that. So that stuff should be thought about in that conjunctive aspect, since one of the CFBISD board members, when I had informed him that he should tell Principal Dawn Rink how she should feel lucky, and the guy asked me why, and I said, because I had enough self-control, because with what she did, because remember this is in the year 2010, remember I had earned my 26 scuba diving certifications in 2009, and the stuff I handled. So I informed this individual that was the vice superintendent at the time when he brought up that he had been in Vietnam and he hadn't ever seen anybody do anything in that capacity. And so I informed him that I knew how to remain calm as best as I could, though legally, because she physically touched me, I had every right to defend myself. And so, because of my care and concern for my son and my daughter as well as other children, I kept my temper tempered because I was dealing with a few things already. And I wasn't interested in certain types of situations. Still am not. It's important to conserve, so that way if there's ever an actual real need, especially after Irving 2001, as well as my scuba diving stuff, self-control is important in those references, because you never know when that would be important to protect and defend. I mean, it's just the areas in the state of Texas keeping those waters clear and that. And then the Gulf of Mexico area regarding a few situations, a couple of lives that were saved, that's all. And then, out off of the Atlantic, not just in the 1980s and 1990s when I was a child growing up out there, going to the Atlantic Ocean, but then also in the year 2009. So, but there's the irony in regards of that Dress Blues picture with the Vietnam ribbon problem. And so, while I didn't know any better because I didn't graduate basic training, he knew he was in the state of Texas. He knew Fort Worth because he went to Fort Worth High School. He knew the area. That's what the choice was that he made. And then there's the other factors to keep in mind. And remember and think about truthfully. as to my innocence in that regard. So today is the 18th of May in the year of 2022. Appreciate subscribers, and if you're gonna leave a comment, please use etiquette and respect. My website is www.susanmeling.com, same as www.ladydorybell.com. 18 May 2022.